Welcome to another live stream. We're going to talk about infiltration and isolation. Targeted individuals experience gang stalking, organized harassment, whatever you want to call it, in just about every area of their life. There are people out there right now who don't even know what's going on, but they are in the process of either being infiltrated or being isolated with organized stalking and harassment. And, there's a lot of different ways that it can happen. I've talked about the different characters that you're going to deal with. I've talked about, the workplace harassment. I've talked about, familial harassment. I've talked about harassment from people you don't even know. They're just the environmental tyranny. But the infiltrators, that's a little bit different. And, when you're dealing with workplace harassment or maybe your social circle or something, they come in there and they cause trouble a lot of times. That's probably the least of your worries, though. And I'm speculating, but, you hear a lot about this from people in their testimony that it's almost as if some of these individuals have been assigned to you, that they are literally stalking you in a way that you didn't even realize before any of this was ever known to you. And there's probably a lot of people out there in the world that are dealing with this, and they just don't know. And I've mentioned before that when targets are harassed, they have those anchors of intense harassment, right? So the gaslighting is canceled out when the perpetrators become obvious. In other words, when they're attacking you and telling you they're going to drive you crazy, or telling you they're going to poison you, or telling you, whatever kind of setup is involved, or, however that's working. To try to convince you, aside from just basically denying that they ever said it, and sometimes they'll do that too. I never said that. They'll do something and just deny it right there and then. Or you'll be dealing with attacks where you have, people surrounding the target within their environment and harassing them and denying it as well. I'm not saying they're not going to deny it, but it's pretty hard to pull the wool all, over someone's eyes after they've been tortured and harassed like that. Okay, I mean, it can happen. Unfortunately, the environmental tyranny can be so intense for targets who are dealing with that, they'll literally eventually just accept it. It's kind of like the peer pressure that I've talked about before when you get the control group and you have the subject. And in the example that it's something obvious, like maybe a 2-foot long stick or something like that versus a foot-long stick, and everybody in the control group says, well, no, this one's, obviously the longer stick and it's the foot-long one. Of course, you can see that's not the case, but people will go along with it. And there's a lot of that kind of thing out there in the world. And you can see it every time you turn on the news or something else, or you see certain individuals and groups protesting, and you try to figure out why they believe that stuff. Why don't they see the bigger picture? What's going on? And a lot of times you wonder if there's something else under the surface, some type of alignment. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, because I've gone into some of the spiritual stuff involving gang stalking. And it's not to be separated from the technological aspect. They're both intertwined, but there's an alignment. And anyone who's been subjected to gang stalking or organized harassment will have to admit that it's pretty evil. Okay. It's obviously, even when you get into the subtle forms of the gaslighting and everything, it's really, there's no way to believe that kind of thing. Okay. And you can see that these people are aligned. And getting back to these infiltrators, what's really going on? A lot of targets will try to figure out, how many people out there really know about what's going on, because there's a lot of individuals that seem to attack the targets with either directed conversations or maybe street theater or other types of activity where they seem to, they're not just being hijacked or manipulated. They seem to know things. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not going to be, a little off in the case of someone being maybe, I don't know, technologically possessed or even demonically possessed. And sometimes that kind of thing happens, and it seems like you're dealing with a duality. It's like, this is not who I think, this individual is not the same person that I'm used to dealing with. And a lot of targets will talk about that. But the thing is there is an alignment. When you get into the legal framework that's out there in the spiritual dimension, I've talked about that before. It's like a legal system. And there are certain things that give the handlers or the spiritual handlers ownership over people. Okay. And even when you get into the deliverance ministries or even the Catholic exorcists and stuff like that, or the Eastern Orthodox exorcists, they talk about this type of thing as well. And one of the problems that they will run into, especially when they're trying to get the right of exorcism in the Catholic Church, which I'm not endorsing any denomination or religion, that person has to be, they have to be complicit in it. They because if they have given themselves over to the dark side through subjugation or other things, which means that they've literally made a deal with the dark side, they own them. They own them. Even when you get into some of the rituals in the secret societies and so on and so forth, or even gang stalking, even some of the things that happen when targets are attacked, those things are similar to rituals. And some of them probably are, literally, because they are doing these things that they're not supposed to do. And it's a violation of God's rules. And within that legal framework, they have put themselves with an alignment to where they are now owned by their handlers. Okay. It's kind of like when you get into witchcraft. I talked about, some of the mythos around that whole thing. And the people try to separate that and make it sound like it's believing in ghosts or something like that. And it is pretty scientific, but it involves humans who are in communion with spiritual beings. Okay. They're just people. But when that happens, it's similar to demonic possession, is that, with the words of Jesus, when a demon is cast out, right, it goes out into waterless places where it cannot find any rest, and it wants to go back in. It needs rest. It's like a house, right? That was the parable that is explaining that. When the house is swept clean, what's the house? It's a vessel. It's a human being, right? And that entity, it's like when a person is homeless, out on the street in the bad weather or whatever. That's not something you want. You want to find rest, and that's what they do. And so all these things are intertwined. And when that legal framework is breached and the alignment goes within that either category, we're in a binary system: darkness, light, friend, enemy, good, evil, so on and so forth. Well, they can do things, and they can afflict people. A lot of targets are attacked, and sometimes they're speculating that maybe the government's doing it. It might not be, even if it's technological, because I think that's where the technology came from. It could be demonic. I don't know. I'd be speculating. The important thing is to be in the right standing with the Lord and watch the framework, right? What's it have to do with? Well, it has to do with all kinds of things, and when you get into gang stalking, that'd be obviously something that is a violation, right, of those very simple, two things within the foundation of the law. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. That's the foundation of the law. You can't do both. You can't be an organized stalker. You can't be a gang stalker and fulfill that. It was never going to happen. They might try to convince you of that. They might try to convince you that they're trying to help you with the gaslighting, as I talked about before, that targets who have that, very aggressive harassment have an anchor. The other people out there in the world, they're surrounded by these whatever you want to call them. And they don't even know it, right? They don't know it. There's people out there that are blind. Some people call them skinwalkers, stuff like that. There's all kinds of, to where, they're just like within that framework, within that alignment, they're like open channels, kind of like when you get into the movie The Matrix, and Smith just, starts jumping, through these people in the Matrix and going after Neo or, the people of Zion or whatever. And it's similar to that, and a lot of targets will talk about that whole thing where all of a sudden their family will turn against them. And they're speculating the FBI or the CIA got a hold of them. You don't know, but sometimes it could be just something like that, or they're out on the run, or they're trying to find solace. And it seems like these people are just activated. It's like you go within certain geographical territories, and you're going to deal with a different type of, infiltration there, right? And I've talked about that with targets. You want to stay out of certain places, stay out of bars, stay away from places where people are doing hard drugs, or engaged in sexual immorality, or witchcraft, or other things that violate that legal framework. Because make no mistake, this is no joke; it's real. Okay, and they will use that to I don't know, for lack of a better way of explaining it, to form a petition to gain access to attack or test an individual. Okay, and it's just like when the people talk about, well, I just went to the bar. I don't know. I'm a targeted individual. I was just minding my own, but you shouldn't be in there anyway. I know that's, some people will say that's controversial, and I got to go live my life. I can do whatever I want. Well, no. If you're a targeted individual, okay, there are certain things you're not going to be able to do anymore, and going to bars is probably one of them. Okay, hanging out with certain people, right? And when you get into the isolation aspect of this, some people will look at that as a negative thing, because it can be, because it's forced, right? And of course, it's not natural to be alone. And I've mentioned before, when you get into deprivation methodology, and they use that in MK Ultra, it's one of the worst things to do. It's a type of torture. It's a type of torment, but it can also be kind of a blessing, knowing that a lot of the people out there have gone to the other side. I mean, it's bad. Okay, it's not getting any better. Okay, there's things out there to mask what is going on. We have technology, and I've talked about that before. It's a fulfillment of the prophecies of Daniel, to where it looks like we're making progress, right? The mythos of the secret societies, which I've talked about before, when you get into the Freemasons, the Illuminati, the Rosicrucians, Committee 300, all the way up to Council of 33, and you get into the Royals, and you get into the foundations of the hierarchy that's out there that ultimately is ruled over by these dark handlers, that, they believe that the world is going into a golden age, right? They believe that they are the rulers. This is their time, literally. And this is the stuff I've talked about before. When you get into lying signs and wonders, and you get into the prophecies, or Deuteronomy 13, 1-5, where God will allow a false prophet or these delusions that are propagated with divine manipulation to come to pass, to test people. And if people are bewitched by these things, these lying signs and wonders, and all the things that are in those secret societies, especially when you get into the higher levels of Freemasonry, or even the Rosicrucians, which they carry this knowledge, this hidden knowledge, the secret wisdom through the ages. And they believe that they're going to be the rightful rulers of Zion, which is planet Earth. I've talked about that before, when you get into the polytheistic stuff, and that's really what that is. And so you have a lot of things that are out there, but getting back into the infiltration and the isolation, it's like now these days, I mean, it's obviously really bad. It's obvious, for targets, it's always been that way, because, you've got a target on your back, and they're activated against you wherever you go. Sometimes it might stop, and it does confuse targeted individuals. Sometimes they might think that their gang stalking has stopped. They don't know, but sometimes that's just the roller coaster that they put you on to confuse you and throw you into their chaos. Because then they can gaslight you, and then, of course, you're reading into things because you've been sensitized or whatever, and then they'll use that. In fact, I was talking to the Nevada testimony, and he had the white vans and stuff like that. A lot of people, it's always similar within that framework, is that they'll use something that's out there and attack you with it, so that you'll eventually read into it and just think you're crazy, or other people think you're crazy, because there's a lot of white vans out there that have nothing to do with you. There's a lot of people with one headlight out there that don't have anything to do with you. There's a lot of people wearing symbols and doing all those things, that are in the secret societies, and they don't even know what they are. They just think they're cool. They're getting tattoos or whatever, and people assume that they're Satanists, but sometimes they can do that. Sometimes you will see things that are similar with these individuals. And, we've talked about, I don't know, probably about 20, 30 years ago, that witchcraft was a whole lot more of a theme than it is now. It's still out there, but people are trying to switch over to a more scientific approach, which I talked about when you get into the satanic cults and the high levels of witchcraft. They had that plan a long time ago to where they want to obfuscate everything with science and psychiatry and all. They kind of explain away the spiritual dimension and all those things that involve that, and use, I don't know, straw man arguments and obfuscation to lead people into darkness and to take them captive. It's like this the stuff we talked about with the delusions of the perpetrators, where they think they're just going to get away with it, or they just think they're going to die. They don't believe anymore, and the environment will facilitate these delusions. Like when you get into the false teachers out there in the churches, the obvious charlatans, and how they've had their ministries for a long time, or the doctrines that are just false and seem ridiculous, and they'll move people into that area, and then they'll become disillusioned. Not to mention the fact that they will use regulation and dysregulation methodology within those places and cults to get people high, literally, with a type of emotional, stimuli, and then they will start to dysregulate them incrementally, depending on what they want to do with them. The people they want to use to propagate the delusions and the doctrines, well, they'll keep them fat and happy, right? And then the other people, well, we just don't know what's wrong with. They must not be one of us or whatever, and they'll get driven out into the exile, into isolation, or out into the proverbial desert. And they will be the vessels of wrath used within that framework, and of course they're to internalize all those things and think that God is dealing with them, and it really has nothing to do with it. And that's why you have to know what's going on, know the truth, and study the Bible, and realize that the Lord will return, and He's not making any mistakes out there. But we all have a responsibility to know the truth and to obey God, and so on and so forth, and resist the evil in the form of that delusion that's out there that would say that all this stuff is just some kind of reptilian thing, or it's all just some kind of deception, or whatever, or it's just not real. It's all just religion, and there's these spiritual vampires that are basically feeding on the loose, and it's like that movie Dark City. You guys ever watch that? You ought to check that out. It's a pretty good movie. But anyway, it kind of reminds me of what targets deal with a little bit. But the thing is that those are deceptions propagated by environmental tyranny that is manufactured, all the way down from the spiritual dimension through those deceiving doctrines and doctrines of demons, and the hierarchy of the world that you're dealing with. And sometimes those strongholds within that legal framework will be familial. Sometimes they'll be geographical, and you can see that. And I've talked about generational curses before. A lot of people will get confused. Well, this problem has always been in my family. Okay. And that's a stronghold. Okay. And what's the solution? Christ. Okay. He's the truth, right? Logic. You can't separate those things. Faith in the truth, faith in God. And does that mean it's going to stop? Well, you might still have to struggle with it, but eventually you can be set free, right? And so what would be the delusion there? Well, there is no more generational curses, but there is strongholds based on that legal framework and the geographical exponential takeover of the spiritual handlers and the infiltrators that come in, right? It's just similar to when you look out there and you see the financial and, the banking system and everything. It's like you get into that, and I don't want to mention any names, but you can see there's obviously a hierarchy. There's obviously a takeover. There's obviously strongholds, and so on and so forth. And that's exponential. And like I said, the churches have been taken over by these wolves. Paul talked about it in Acts 20. And what do we have? We've got all these lies and deception and corruption. And it's like that with big pharma. And, it's all connected. It's all connected. And so now is a really bad time to be, just mingling and running around and, opening yourself up to this stuff. And so isolation can be something that's productive. And I would recommend that if you're a target, if you're going to get involved with someone, you better have protocols, and you better be very careful who you're dealing with. Because like I said, sometimes people can be hijacked. Sometimes they're literally assigned to you. I've experienced weird stuff like that. to where I remember directed conversations when I was younger and things that didn't manifest for, maybe a decade or more. But when they did exactly as these people were kind of mumbling around me and talking about all these weird things. And, when you're a little kid, they always talk in code around you, but you still hear what they're saying. And it seems like sometimes maybe they even want you to hear that stuff because they want you to look nuts anyway if you're one of those targets who's been dealing with this your whole life. And there are people involved in cults and stuff like that. And who knows, the people have gone, into the speculation of people being used as a type of menticide sacrifice where they just drive you crazy and use you as the scapegoat, literally, in the proverbial desert of your deprivation and, being driven crazy to appease, the gods of whatever. And, but really, they're just storing up condemnation for themselves and solidifying their communion with their dark spiritual handlers that own them and will eventually devour everything. And right now, it doesn't seem like anything's happening to them. And I've talked about that before. It can be a little confusing because people are like, well, if these entities are feeding on us, how come they're not feeding on these people? They're not being driven crazy. Well, no, they've already owned them, right? Their alignment is with them. And if they die, they get everything. You were created in the image of God, and you have the opportunity for eternal life. And there's something thereafter, right? There's something they get. It's not just emotional loosh. Okay, there's a huge motivation for them to come after you and deceive mankind and use them to come after you. Okay, it's like that. Some of you guys out there are dealing with more of a type of government-based program or some kind of technological thing, but it's connected, and you just haven't experienced the other thing yet. And when people start moving towards the light, then that's when they really start seeing some of that stuff. A lot of the people out there that don't really, experience the spiritual darkness, well, they might be atheists, or they might just, haven't gotten to that place where they're even, pushing towards that whole thing. And so they're not going to have any opposition. To them, their delusion is different than the people out there that have been taken captive to be activated as literal hunters and infiltrators, because that's really what they are. People talk about, monitoring spirits and people who are, surveilling them and kind of hunting them down and infiltrating their life and then introducing them to maybe drugs or sexual immorality or whatever. And that kind of thing happens. And, you might just think it's someone in your community, and you might just think they want to be your friend, or you just keep running into them. But really, there's something else going on. And I've seen that. I mean, you could argue with it. You could say it's controversial. That's fine. You could disagree with me, but I've seen these things, and they know. I'm not on the inside of any of those circles, but I've been around them, and I've heard them talking, and I've seen it. I grew up around it, and I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it's there. And there is a type of alignment involved in that. And when people are dealing with this activity, I mean, when targeted individuals experience this, it's always been there, and you are thrown into the meat grinder, right? All these themes, all these people, and sometimes it's later in life that people experience it, but when it's activated, you finally see it. And it's so, as far as isolation, yeah, they want to use it to break you down, but it can be used for your benefit. And like I said, I'm not telling anyone they have to isolate, but just going out and mingling and not really being aware of who or what you're dealing with, it's not a good idea. And it happens all the time. Like I said, you see those people that I just went to the bar and I'm just going to have a couple beers. Next thing you know, I was in jail. Oh yeah. Or you were walking down the street, and then you get pulled over by one of those, infiltrated authorities. Not all cops are bad. There's a lot of good cops out there. And they seem to know. They know they can be activated. It's like all the weird stuff that we talk about on this channel that people think we're crazy. But if you're a target, you've seen it. Okay, you've seen those things, and like I said, it's based off alignment. It's based off that legal framework. It's based off the delusions, the destiny philosophy, and the mythos of the secret societies up in the hierarchy that we've talked about many, many times. Sometimes you have familial things going on. It's just geographical. Sometimes these people are assigned to you. Sometimes they're technologically taken over. Sometimes they're literally possessed by spiritual entities, and they are activated against targeted individuals by their handlers. They are owned by them, and sometimes it's to experiment, to feed, to plague, to play. It is the hive mind. I'm going to go into the comments and see who's out there. Holy Water, welcome to the live stream. Justin Cackler, welcome. David Dotson, welcome to the live stream. Mindy, welcome. And Mindy says that she's surrounded by these people. This is a pretty controversial live stream, but you know what? It is what it is. And I've talked about these things before. But Mindy says, I'm surrounded with these people in my neighborhood, and I think I need to move. Okay, you that's kind of what I'm getting at. I mean, you're not really going to be able to move and get away from them. So I wouldn't recommend that, because what happens is they just, because it costs a lot of money to leave. You have to put a deposit down, and they will wear you out financially. If you've got a huge amount of money, moving to another neighborhood is probably not a good idea, because guess what? They're probably there too, right? They're probably there too. And it's like targets when they get workplace harassment and they try to find a job where they're not getting harassed. It might last a couple of weeks. They might be waiting when you get there, right? You can run, but you can't hide. And it's you just end up banging your head against a brick wall. The best thing to do is try to keep yourself safe where you are. Try not to spend all your money. Try to live, within that legal framework where you're pleasing to God, not involved in sexual immorality or hard drugs or any of those other things that they use, or the evil activity these people are involved in, and just try to do as much as you can for yourself within the environmental control that you have, and set up reasonable boundaries around you. You can't just do that. You're always probably you're going to be surrounded by these people no matter where you go. So my advice would be to simplify your life and just let them do all the worrying. Let them be the aggressors. And don't they like it when you run. It's kind of like if you come across maybe a bear in the woods, last thing you want to do is turn your back and run. They're fast. Okay, you're done at that point. You stare them down. Okay, you always do that. But anyway, you don't want to just run. And I'm assuming I'm still out there. I don't know if my phone just tweaked out on me, but it just flipped out of there. Well, that'd be interesting if my phone was hacked as I'm doing a live stream. I mean, we don't want that. Bonnie, welcome to the live stream. Okay. Ferthal H, welcome to the live stream. Okay. I'm assuming you guys are having that conversation. I don't think that was a question for me. Steve the Pigeon, welcome to the live stream. Okay. And by the way, I'd like to welcome or invite everyone into and I've got the link in the description for an interview. Let's get your testimony out there. It's going to be first name only or anonymous. And we can do that on StreamYard. And, I'm going to have to get a hold of you and discuss to see whether it's something that we can allow on the channel. And because perps will come in here and pretend like they're targets. And they'll suck the life out of you and waste your time and play games with you. And they're infiltrators, right? They're infiltrators. So you'll kind of have to be screened or whatever. And we'll go over the rules and, but yeah, you're invited. Your testimony matters. And so does your anonymity. And like I said, we're going to try and keep those rules. I know a lot of people out in the target community, I don't know why you got to show your face and all this. It's like, that's dangerous. You know how many people are out there in this community that are just here to harass people at the very least? And who knows what else they're doing? There's some real twisted people out there. And of course, there's no, shortage of perps. And they always want the same thing, control, and they like to bully people. So Let's get back in here. And New Neo says, Happy New Year. Yeah, Happy New Year to you. Okay. All right. I'm just going to get some good questions here. I'm looking for something here. Okay. And John Hoochin says the sound is good. Oh, thank you very much. Michael McChastine, or it's Michael Chastain, excuse me, says Jesus Christ is King. Yes, he is. Absolutely. I'm going to go, and that was all the way up the top. Sentinel, welcome to live stream. Okay. It looks like Sentinel agrees that there are a lot of people pretending to be targets and pretending to have legitimate channels, but they're kind of playing games. And I've seen that too. It makes you wonder what's going on. It's hard to trust anybody. I say people earn trust, but they'll try to make you feel guilty for that too. It's like you're paranoid. Well, yeah, of course I am. I've been attacked. I'm dealing with harassment. I'm dealing with infiltrators. You're dealing with a lot of things if you're a targeted individual, and they're going to try to gaslight you with that. And that's when it really becomes interesting within the environment of the target, is that they'll change it. Like I said earlier, they'll back off. Oh, it's just like everything's normal all of a sudden, and you're just supposed to snap out of it. It's like that movie, The Game, with Michael Douglas, and oh no, this is just a game. You really didn't kill your brother, and yeah, you jumped off a building, but you had fun. Let's go have some champagne, and it's like what? But it's not that easy, and really, when someone is traumatized, it takes a long time to heal. It doesn't take long to traumatize someone. It can happen in 5 minutes. The first time someone experiences a break-in, somebody gets in their house and does something to their food or rearranges their furniture, like the Stasi techniques that I've talked about, or whatever they're going to do, use to direct a conversation with personal information or something, that's, it shakes you to the core. The implications are obvious. You're being watched. You're being hunted. People are in your business. They're invading your space. They're invading your life. They're invading your mind, especially when we were talking about that stuff in the Nevada testimony, with V2K and demonic voices and everything else. Who knows what's going on. And that's trauma. And you're not just going to snap out of it. And they know it too. They're going to play with you, right? A lot of targets have asked me, can I heal? Yeah, you can heal. You can grow too. And you can live a happy life. You might be, more in isolation than the rest of the people out there that don't know or that are hooked up within that hive mind, the alignment that I talked about. And of course, they like playing games with targets, and of course, they want you to be gaslighted into thinking that you just don't like people, or you're, some type of antisocial person, or a freak, or you're paranoid, or whatever. But really, that's just manufactured, and they know it. It's like when targets are accused of being mentally ill, and you're reading into it, and well, yeah, but there's a way that things work, and you can't forget there's a science around this whole thing, But they like to gaslight people with that, right? And they like to flip your environment around to do that, and they'll get real theatrical. Sometimes it'll go on for a while, because they know it's a scientific equation. They know that it's going to take you time to snap out of it. It's going to take time for you to stop rabbit holing, and it's like when a target experiences, that aggressive food tampering or something like that. Oh, come on, don't you want to come out to eat? Yeah, we'll take you out to, such and such a restaurant or whatever. And, of course the target's going to be paranoid or whatever. And, trying to explain something like this to somebody just sounds completely nuts. What do you mean people can be activated? What do you mean people are hunted? What do you mean people are within a legal framework of the spiritual dimension? What do you mean there's witchcraft or the occult? What are you talking about? That's crazy. Demons in church? What do you mean? Paul was talking about wolves and false teachers. Yeah. And they're pretty much everywhere. But there's also spiritual activity that's connected to that whole thing. And there's a legal framework involved too. And there's a social structure that they create around those places, right? With the complementary stimuli to go along with it. And it's exponential gaslighting. And a thing get you to internalize that stuff then they control you, right? Because that's just another form of possession. When you believe their lies, when you believe that stuff, a lot of targets will deal with gaslighting involved in their harassment. Is, well, we're just trying to help you out. We're just trying to get you off drugs. We're just trying to get your character defects in line. We're just trying to wake you up. It's like that movie, The Game. I was blind, but now I can see. We're trying to help you. It's like snake pit therapy, but they're not. They're feeding, and that's another thing that a lot of targets will talk about is what are they getting out of this. And like I said, with the spiritual dimension, they're after your soul. They're after you. The people, they're helping their spiritual handlers, and they're getting them high, right? And they're also avoiding persecution, right? They get money or whatever. You've heard of people who've subjugated, which is basically making a deal with the dark side that they get money, they get benefits, freedom from persecution, so on and so forth. The four P's: power, pleasure, privilege, the passing of time. And it's people sell their soul for it, literally, right? You heard about that where you get into Hollywood and some of these people literally, made a deal or something just to get what they, that's kind of what they're talking about. Even when you get into the Catholic exorcisms we were talking about earlier, is that they look into that kind of thing because they can't really perform an exorcism on someone if they're not willing to change their alignment. Right? They can't do that. If you're not willing to quit being a witch or involved in, maybe astrology or something like that, we're not going to do it because that's the gateway that they use to get into that individual's life. If you're going to continue to live in adultery or, in fornication where you're just out, being sexually promiscuous where there's no point in it. Right? Because why? Because that's the legal framework. We cannot free you if you're willingly being bound up by the kingdom of darkness to do their will. They will take you captive, right? And they've taken these people captive, and they've probably offered them things and stuff like that. I'm gonna go back to the comments. And Mindy says, "I don't trust anyone except one chosen friend and my life coach." And that's quite a bit, actually. I'm going to put that up there. There's nothing wrong with it. That's realistic. That's reality. There's nothing wrong with that, Mindy. And that's good. Because that's, especially if you're a targeted individual, even people who aren't targets find that stuff out. In fact, I was watching a video a while ago where, these men are retiring probably a little early, but maybe in their 50s or whatever, and they've made money on crypto or whatever they've done. They don't need to worry about going to work anymore, and they've also kind of broken away from that type of fraternity like mentality where when you're younger you're out hanging out with people and partying and doing this and that. It's like these at first it's confusing for them. Right. And they're like, well, I don't know. Am I, because they get accused, they get gaslighted. Am I being antisocial? But what do they realize? People are just kind of using them, right? By and large, not everybody. They might have a couple good friends like Mindy's talking about. But, the masses, the groups, the big cliques, it's worthless. It's just all paper mache. It's all thorns in the fire. It burns hot and bright, but it's really, there's nothing to it, and it's just, it's really the inevitability for a lot of people. And it's if you have one good friend, that's very valuable, and it's realistic too. And I don't think that there are a lot of people out there who have what they're claiming. It's like when you get on social media and you see these people and they have all these huge gatherings and the family pictures and everything. I saw that in my family, and it's all just, it looks good, but there's nothing really there. People are always fighting and there's a separation, bad blood in the family, but it's like, whatever. And you see that, some enmeshed families, have that delusion, but then it just all falls apart when something happens. When there's, money, people start fighting over money or whatever. And it's basically, it's built on convenience. It's kind of like what the Joker was saying. When the chips are down, these people will eat each other. And I'm not agreeing with it. I'm just saying that it happens. Okay. And it's kind of an illusion. And there's nothing wrong with isolating. And like I said, if you're a target, it might be something you need to do to protect yourself. I've been doing it more and more, and I've been doing this for decades. But as I've moved through the menagerie of this dispensation of harassment, sometimes it'll back off, and then you get out there, but it always happens again. And I'm not saying that you can't escape or that you can't live your life, but you just have to be realistic about where you are, and that's kind of what we're talking about. I'm gonna go back in the comments. Okay. Okay. Firthou 8 says, you ever realize everybody is just minding their own business, but always disrupts yours? Yeah, they're minding their own business until they're not. Yeah. I had that happen with a neighbor a while back. The guy was going after my cameras and everything and knocking them. He was just having a bad week, I think, or something. Kind of took it out on me. But I'm over there asking what's going on, and he's like, "Well, yeah." And I said, I brought something up. He said, "Well, I'm just minding my own business," and walked in his house. I said, "Well, not really." I'm thinking to myself, because the only reason I'm over here is because you came and attacked my personal property, dude. That's not minding your own business. Duh. But yeah, they're always minding their own business until they're in yours, right? And that's a good point, because when you're dealing with an infiltrator, there's a lot of reasons that they'll use, to get involved in your business, especially if you're a target. When you're dealing with those people that are monitoring you or surveilling you, or they want to get the dirt, or they want to ask you some key questions, or they just want to get in there so they can agitate you, trigger you or something, minimize you or whatever. Perps, trolls, same thing. And they'll get in there. Maybe they'll pretend like they're your friend. Maybe they'll pretend to have things in common with you. Maybe they'll offer financial help or whatever. Or sometimes they'll play stupid, like they need your help. But it's really hard for targets, because you're vulnerable, especially if you're new at this and you're used to being a social creature, because you're lonely. And like I said, it's unnatural. They take advantage of that mechanism. And you want to keep yourself busy. You want to try to study. You want to try to improve yourself. Distract yourself with dialectic behavioral therapy, things that require your attention and your focus, because the default rumination is always going to be there. It's like when you have a doctor's appointment and you're worried about it and you're up at night. If you don't get up and do something, if you can't fall back asleep, you're just going to sit there and you're going to grind metal. It's and you might even work yourself up into a panic or something, because that's the default mode of your brain. And they've given you a problem where you really can't go solve it, because you're not in control of these people. And so the problem is always going to be there. And you're trying to live. You're going around in circles. It's like that circular thinking. And they love that. But these infiltrators will come in and they might offer to help you or whatever, or pretend like they're nice or kind, but they have malevolent intentions. And they want leverage, they want dirt, and they want you to pay attention to them. And sometimes they just have to get you within earshot. It's like when targets talk about wearing headphones and stuff like that. Sometimes you got to do that. I got to the place where I just don't even care. I use it for affirmation, right? But for new targets, it's really tough, because they don't know what's going on. It's scary. And when you become vulnerable, like maybe you got covertly drugged or poisoned, or who knows what's going on. And then it's like they all come out like sharks. It's like there's blood in the water, and it's just like everywhere. And there's even things that can happen to you technologically, to where they can activate those things and give you, like, I don't know, anxiety or depression. We've talked about some of the symptoms that targets deal with, where they'll have the ringing in their ear, usually the left ear for some reason, maybe pressure in their head. It's like a magnetic field, and then you have other things going on. It's like somebody's maybe, it's like your ears being blocked or something, or you'll have a switch in mood, or you'll be dealing with something, or it might. I've even heard targets say that that'll happen to them right before a specific individual shows up. It's like, but they'll be, I don't know, one of those perps or whatever, like an infiltrator, or they'll find it out later. But it's it sounds crazy. It's like I wasn't even going to talk about this stuff, but I've talked about it all before. I mean, when you get into the spiritual aspect of gang stalking, it is absolutely the foundation. Technology, all that stuff is secondary. And like I said, all that stuff, even when you get into the programs, it's secondary because they're being controlled by these beings, these spiritual handlers, all the way up into the secret societies, even at the top. And when you get into the dark government programs, the deep state stuff, all those things are connected. They might not know it. They might have believed and been bewitched by the whole thing, and they just think it's science and all this religion needs to go and all this belief in Jesus is ridiculous and so on and so forth. They might believe, they might think they're atheist, but really they're going to find that stuff out later. And, the darkness that's out there is, like in 2 Corinthians 4:4, the God of this world has blinded the minds of people to the glorious gospel of Christ. And that's how they do it. And the environment is that's a very strong stimuli. You got false teachers. You've got exponential injustice. You've got all these things that are going on, and it just doesn't even look possible, right? It's like the stuff that I talked about when you get into these, satanic cults and everything, is they were going to turn the world upside down in such a way just to obfuscate the truth and to blind people and to corrupt the whole world so much that God would just relent on judging anyone because it just, all the mechanisms have been infiltrated. Every aspect of the world has been infiltrated, and that it just wouldn't work. But of course, that's a delusion. God knows what he's doing. He's not intimidated by any of this stuff. And no matter whether you've been in a family that's involved in a cult or something like that, where you do have these strongholds, is that you can be set free, right? He can do that. And it's not about like deliverance in the sense that you're looking for some type of event. That's usually a big problem because people do that. They're looking for a quick fix, or they're looking for somebody to cast a demon out of their life, or, to come and chase it out of their house or something. It's really not how it works. I thought that too, but it's really not how it works. You just have to live in a consistent way where you're drawing near to God and walking in the truth, in the light, and that's enough. And sometimes it's a fight. It's not just an event, okay? And a lot of the people that get delivered that way, it doesn't work out for them because they don't grow. They think that they've been set free. It's like, well, I've been baptized. Now I'm fine. Everything's okay. And they don't realize that they're in a battle that's exponential, that it's like a journey. It's a journey, into the communion with the Lord. And a lot of people get confused, and it's like the once saved, always saved debate. Well, in order to believe that you've lost your salvation, you have to conflate it with an event, a point in time, right? Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you want to turn, the devil into some type of ridiculous hamburglar. Well, I'm gonna get some stuff. I'm gonna get your fries. And no, he wants to get you, right? Well, if you could just go get baptized or just walk an aisle or something, or, believe one thing one time, and now you're saved. And it's, well, what's he after then? He'd have to be an idiot, right? Okay, well, obviously that's not what's going on. And it's a journey, right? And your faith is going to be tested. And all these delusions and the exponential framework that we've been talking about, and the spiritual powers and the handlers and these infiltrators that are after you, are part of that. And they've been taken captive. And if they don't repent, they will be devoured and they will end up under the wrath of God. They're going to go to hell. Okay, it's very serious stuff. The spiritual application to gang stalking, organized harassment, and everything else that you're dealing with is very real. Let me go back in the comments. Okay. All right. And Justin Clacker says that the Joker was the good guy. Hilarious. Yeah. Paris Logan, welcome to the live stream. Wow, and this is interesting here. New Neo has something here. This looks pretty intense. New Neo says, I have shown my wife irrefutable evidence, but my wife refuses to believe me. Who are you that all of this should be happening to you? Are you some kind of special victim? Yeah. Well, I'm I got a lot to say about that. Okay. That's part of the gaslight. I'm not saying your wife is gaslighting you because it's the logical implication, right? They use the basic conceptual framework that I've talked about before. You have the basic conceptual framework out there that these things don't happen, right? That people are normal. They're not like, vampires and skinwalkers and all that weird stuff that when you start talking to demon possessed people, that's not, there's none of that stuff is real. Right. And so why would anybody do this? Why would the government do something? Well, they want to control everybody. They want to experiment on people. They want data. And then you get into the spiritual aspect of it. They're hunting people and they're taking them captive and making them do evil things so they can own them and stuff like that. Why would anybody do that? Well, there's a reason. Okay. And they get something out of it. Like I said, sometimes they subjugate and so on and so forth. And it's evil. But oh, come on, really? Most of the people are down at the park eating hot dogs and flying kites. Well, they should be. Those are usually the blind people. Now they do exist. They're the neutral people. They're just like part of the background. They just use that as a delusion, so everything looks normal still. But they know, those people are just like they're little sheep. They eat them. They're like the aphids that the ants herd around and suck the glucose out of them. It's just they're just part of that little herd that they feed on, and they'll leave them alone, and they'll use them as a plausible deniability when they want to go after somebody, and then they'll just paint them as crazy. Right? Why are you so special? Why are you experiencing all this? Why would the government spend all that money on you? Well, for a lot of reasons, they'll experiment on people. They want to find out what's going on. They need data. They want to learn how to control people, and they want to condemn people and get their hands dirty, and then they come after you and do that, and then they own them. And, beyond that, I don't know what to tell you because that's really the whole point of when someone is targeted. And of course, the plausible deniability is always the same. Why would all these people do that? Why would you be special? So the implication is either that you think you're special or that you feel guilty. I've heard that one too. Why would you think that people would do something like that to you? Do you have a guilty conscience? Do you think somehow that you deserve to be harassed and stalked? Maybe it's some kind of a repressed psychological condition. Well, no. But that's there. It's almost there to trigger you. At that point, you're done. At that point, you whether they're trying to do it or not. Maybe they just don't understand. Maybe they're one of the people out there that don't know, and that's okay. But it doesn't really matter because it's just going to trigger you, man. It's going to trigger you. It's a the perps will minimize you with it and gaslight you with it, and the other people they're just going to think you're crazy. That's why I've talked about the fact before that, it's like doing this channel is really breaking all the rules for me, but at this point, it doesn't matter. I know I'm helping some of you guys out, but you don't try to convince people. That's what New Neo is telling you is he's the perfect example of what happens to people. And it's frustrating. And you don't need to do that to yourself. Just relax. And, the silence is golden. Now, you have a lot of leverage and a lot of power by not trying to call people out and just watching them, man, seeing what they're doing, because the truth is they need some of this stuff. They're not just, walking around, deciding all of a sudden to do this. There's a reason why they're doing it. There's a reason why they're messing with you and all that stuff. Some people speculate that it's like spiritual vampires or whatever. They're being controlled by their handlers, and what do they want? They want something too. Everybody wants something, but you're really the only one minding your own business. You're really the only one not hunting anyone down. you're really the only one that's self-sufficient in this whole thing. They want to take you captive. They either want to feed on you or turn you, right? But that's classic. And my sympathy goes out to you. It's always going to be the same thing. Oh, you must feel like you deserve to be this. It's a guilty conscience, or you think you're special, or something else, or you're having a persecutory delusion, or some type of factitious manifestation of mental illness. Unfortunately, that's always what's going to happen. That was a good one, though. Okay. Well, unfortunately, and I'm not saying this is what's going on with you, but there have been people that, Stasi techniques were to use honeypots. Some people got married to their targets to keep an eye on them, man. I mean, that's creepy. So I've dated people like that too, and they admitted it to me. And you could see what was going on. Sounds crazy, but it is what it is. Now, don't freak out and like get a divorce or something like that. You're gonna know if somebody's attacking you, though. If you're hearing little words and phrases here and there, I mean, that's probably just a coincidence. If somebody doesn't know about this, well, I wouldn't have believed it unless I saw it for myself. It just sounds too crazy, and people are too busy and worn out to be troubled with this kind of thing. It's hard enough to exist within the regular world, and we become a targeted individual. It's just nuts. It's beyond anything that anybody can handle without the power of God. And I've talked about that before. That's one of the blessings. You want to pray, you want to draw near to God. You need his help anyway, but now you really need it. Okay. And Steve, the pigeon says, we'll put this up here. Steve, the pigeon says, I wear headphones in my apartment 24/7, but I can't wear them when bathing. Oh, yeah. Okay. Just this morning, I was taking a bath, and the neighbor in the apartment below started banging on the walls. Yep. Oh, yeah. They like that. A lot of these things are synchronized because they want to take away your peace. They want to take away your joy. They want to take away your homeostasis. They want to trigger you. They want to keep you in that dilemma that you can't solve. So you go into solution mode and freak out or get angry or just, have a meltdown or whatever. But it's like that, and they know it. Thank God that we do have times of refreshing. And I've talked about apartments. They're horrible, a nightmare. If you're a new targeted individual, or if you're one of those people that come through here and you're living in an apartment, you know what I'm talking about. Try to find something affordable. And when you do, thank God for it, because apartments are a nightmare. My heart goes out to you, Steve. God bless. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay. Okay. Yeah. New Neo says my wife is just ignorant. Yeah. Well, that's good. It's just, I mean, think about it. If she finds out, she'll probably go crazy. You don't want that, man. At least you won't be alone, though. A couple that are targeted is a powerful thing. And there's, I think, Matson, Miss and Mr. Matson Miles. I haven't seen them in a while. They're both targets, and they're a force to be reckoned with. It's very rare, though. Usually, what they'll do is they'll separate targets to the point where they won't let you have a relationship or whatever. So at least she's not a stalker. You know what I'm saying? So that's good. Okay. Mindy says, trust no one. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's not you have to be negative. You just have to be realistic. You can trust the Lord, but people, they will turn on you. And it's the way it is, unfortunately. Okay. Okay. And we're still talking about the Joker. He's an interesting character. People talk about Heath Ledger being a targeted individual. And when you get into some of the stuff that happens in Hollywood, there's people out there that even I even mentioned that when you get into those MK Ultra sub programs where they were trying to create, you know, people to infiltrate, like Operation Mockingbird, and but some of them, you know, they break away and you just don't know, or maybe they subjugated, maybe they made a deal. There was all those people that died at age 27, you know, the 27 Club or whatever. That was creepy. Oh, Miss Matson Miles, well, you are there. Yes, yes, indeed. We have a couple right there. A powerful, a wonder twin, targeted couple. You guys are gonna get shirts like that now, huh? They deal with a lot of fuming and stuff like that. It's pretty aggressive harassment. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. All right. Okay. Well, I know this is a controversial topic, and a lot of people get confused. As I said, when trying to mingle or mix the spiritual and the technological together, but really they're absolutely connected. And at the foundation, there is a spiritual aspect to this whole thing, and it does manifest through government programs and occult activity and so on and so forth. But make no mistake, there is a framework out there, and there's also a legal framework. And as a targeted individual, you have to be aware of these things. And like I said, sometimes isolation is not a bad thing. And the world is not getting any better. So I guess you just try to enjoy it. Dead Pirate Lenny, welcome to the live stream. And Dead Pirate Lenny says, I am a human subject. Can I get paid now? I'll put that up there. Well, thanks for that, Dead Pirate Lenny. Yeah, yeah. At least give you a break on your taxes or something, man. Buy you one of those electric vehicles or something, man. Yeah. No respect. No respect. Oh, so Matson. Oh, okay. We got to look at this one here. Mrs. Matson Miles says, "Oh boy, it's crazy. Digging hose to give us a break from the gas." Okay, so you guys are still dealing with the fuming. Oh my gosh. And I think Matson was mentioning that you guys, if, you know, they actually came in and did some DIY stuff or whatever when you guys were gone. It's like creepy. You know, a lot of targets will talk about that, man. It's like you'll notice something, maybe a little splotch on the wall where it looks like there's fresh paint, or maybe they, you know, messed with the sheetrock. And because you don't know, targets deal with that whole thing to where it's like, you know, you're being watched, you know, that somehow you're being surveilled or something's going on, but you just don't know what it is. And you just weren't looking for that kind of thing before, you know, and then you start looking for this stuff, and you might even get covertly drugged or something, just make you even more paranoid. Then you start seeing things. It's like, good gosh, it's horrible. Okay. Well, we'll just put a prayer out there for all the targets and Mrs. and Mr. Matson Miles, that they would have relief and refreshing in the new year ahead. In the name of our Lord, the Most High. Yeah, well, there's Matson. He's in moderator. Yeah, they're relentless. Yeah, they are. My gosh. Okay. Well, guys, you know, we've talked about this issue before. We've talked about how there's a lot of different ways this stuff works. That targets will be infiltrated in their social circle, in their family, at church, in their religion, in their community, and even in their mind. And you know, like I said, you can't separate technology from the spiritual dimension. And you have to understand that you're going to be dealing with these delusions, these illusions, and the gaslighting is exponential. You know, people are going to accuse you of feeling special. They're going to accuse you of being paranoid. They're going to accuse you of reading into things. You're going to be accused of maybe some of the smear campaign stuff that targets talk about, whether it's deviance or just being antisocial. But you have to remember that all these things are going to come out eventually. Okay. And that, really it's just like anything else. They say, it takes two to tango. They want your participation within this. They want you to participate with them. They want you to react. And it's not that you have to, deny your God-given emotions and everything else, but you must deny them a reaction because they are not legitimate. And a lot of the things around targets are just phony. It's just like an act. And, it wears you out at first until you figure it out. It's like when people get online for the first time and they start arguing with someone, it's like, oh no, I'm right. You have to see my point of view. And then they realize that this person is either a bot or they're just a troll, and they don't even care whether you're right. They just want to suck the life out of you. And that's the way it is with these gang stalkers. That's the way it is with these people. They are there, and it doesn't have to be legitimate. It doesn't have to be legal. It doesn't have to be reasonable. They are there to just suck the life out of you, drive you crazy, deceive you, gaslight you, manipulate you, feed on you. And that's it. That's all they want. And, with that kind of an option out there, there's nothing wrong with isolation. Use it productively. Try to study, try to better yourself, draw near to God, work on your education, work on your health. There's a whole lot of videos in the playlist. If you've never been in there, if you're a new member to the channel or you just haven't looked at the playlist, there is a lot of stuff you can binge watch. And I don't put anything up there that is garbage. Some of it is like I don't know if you guys have seen the new one that I put up there, the true story behind the movie Predator. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but boy, it's interesting, right? It's interesting, right? But, there's a lot of ways to distract yourself. Like I said, the default program of your mind, of your programming, is to ruminate. And they've given you plenty of things to think about, unfortunately, in a dilemma that has given them a lot of leverage over you if you let them do it. You don't want to do that, right? And you want to make them get aggressive to cancel out the gaslighting, because, of course, we can't have you going crazy. Okay, we don't want that. Of course, we're all crazy anyway. We're all suffering from the same mass delusion, right? Yeah, whatever. And there's a lot of resources. Like I said, if you want to get your testimony out, go into the link, join the harassment support group 911, and get a hold of me on there. Once you send me a friend request, I'll be able to get that rolling, and we'll see what we can do. I do work usually every day, and I'm very busy, so I'm going to try and get to that as soon as possible. But I've already reached out to some people, and some people have said they're thinking about it. Some people want to do it. Other people don't, and that's okay, because that might be what you need to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But like I said, just like the reason you're in here for affirmation, and maybe even just for entertainment or education, you have something to contribute. I'd like to thank everyone for coming in. I'd like to thank everyone that they hit the like button. There's no reason not to. There's no excuse. Okay. We got to push this stuff out there. Like, share, and subscribe. God bless. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.